Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest instalment of Remote Product London. Great to see some of you back again and some new faces. Got two great talks this evening, although we are having a little bit of a technical difficulty with our second speaker, Kana. As planned anyway, Marton is going to be speaking first, and fingers crossed we can get things going for Kana. So just a couple of gentle or kind requests, guys. If I could ask everyone just to make sure they're on mute. And please, if you have any questions for the speakers, just drop them in to the chat privately to me. Please do make them clear as well, because sometimes it's difficult for me to make them out. But any questions, privately put them into chat to me, and I will ask them to our speakers at the end. And as I say, just if I could kindly ask everyone to stay on mute, because it really helps with the fluidity of the event and allows our speakers to have a true opportunity to deliver their talks. So I'm going to hand you over now to Marton Gaspar. He is a chatbot and product discovery consultant, and his talk is on why we need chatbots and how you should build them. Marton, over to you.
Hi, guys. Thanks for attending. 1 second, I'll share my screen and we should be good to go. So I'm going to talk to you about chatbots. Can you all see me?
Yeah, that looks perfect. You're good to go.
Good. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about chatbots, great ones and the ones that could benefit from product thinking. When it comes to chatbots, some companies don't apply product management best practices, and it costs them dearly. I'll show you how you can use your product skills to build awesome bots. Okay, so sorry about that. So a bit about me. When I left uni, I started to work as an AI researcher focusing on chatbots, and had the pleasure of working for the largest chatbot project in the UK at the time, for Royal Bank of Scotland with IBM Watson and Mindshare. In 2016, I started a chatbot agency where I build bots for banks, startups, and tech companies alike, like Microsoft, Lloyds, and HSBC. I've been a product consultant focusing on chatbots and discovery for over 6 years now. I also organize the largest chatbot and voice assistant meetup in Europe. Here are some of the brands I build chatbots for. Feel free to ask questions as you go along on Zoom, and I'll try to answer them during the Q&A after the talk. So today, we're going to cover what chatbots are, who's using them, and why. We'll go through how people often approach building bots with 2 real-life examples. And I'll show you what happens if you apply product thinking to the bot development process. By the end of this talk, you should feel more confident in starting your own bot project and have better understanding of how to find good bot problem where you work. So, if you don't already know, a chatbot is an automated software that can help have conversations with humans. It can give answers to you or do a task for you. So it's like a digital robot on the website or in your app that replies to you or does something for you. There are 2 main types of chatbots. Scripted bots have a decision tree and they follow a fixed conversational path, whereas AI bots listen for the intent behind your response and direct you to the answer they think you meant. In this talk, I will only cover chatbots and will not talk about voice bots such as Siri or Alexa. Chatbots are already huge and they are growing. Over 1.4 billion people are using chatbots already. The market has grown from $1.2 billion in 2018 to a predicted $7.5 billion by 2024. Millennials are now willing to spend around £481 per year via bots, which is huge. The market shows no signs of slowing down, and with recent developments with COVID, automation and reducing human contact is needed more than ever, and people are embracing it. For example, Drift had a 500% increase in the use of their bots during the pandemic. So it makes sense that product managers like you are interested in them. A 2020 product management report said 37% of product managers want to build chatbots or other conversational interfaces. And I'll show you how to get started. So why bot space is hot? Let's have a look at some of the reasons. Customers like them. 64% of customers said their favorite feature in bots is their 24/7 availability, while others said they love them for their instant responses. 46% of them said it's their preferred choice to get in touch with a brand. And anonymity can be hugely powerful for customers. Businesses also like bots, partially because customers like them, but also because they add other business value. They can be great at reducing churn rates and customer service costs by as much as 30%. Bots can also increase revenue and customer interaction. Now, one myth I want to bust is that employees hate automation. Studies show that if bots are integrated into the workforce the right way, they can empower workers, freeing them up from mundane and repetitive tasks. This is shown in the 44% increase in employee satisfaction. So what about product managers? Bots are fantastic for product managers to work on because there's no need to worry about graphical user interface. Rapid prototyping is quick and simple, so you can test value early on. Making changes is super simple with bots as well. That means iterating to ensure that you're constantly building value at a rapid pace is easy. Think about the current situation with COVID. Sometimes rapid response can save lives. Deploying is also easy. You can just stick a line of code into your website and you're live. And your users can enjoy your new bot 24/7. You can also learn more about your users by analyzing your conversations. You can automate capturing user feedback and recruit users to interview using your bot. This facilitates continuous discovery on other products as well as the bot itself. Here are some great examples of successful bots. Rainbow is a bot that supports domestic abuse victims in South Africa. It keeps the users anonymous and allows them to reach out for help secretly during the night. YourMD helps people diagnose what health conditions people may have, reducing unnecessary doctor's visits. Its personalized and reliable medical knowledge helps people, which makes it an outstanding bot. Shell's Lube Chat helps engineers choose between more than 10,000 industrial lubricants for their machinery. Complex, structured knowledge base helps engineers quickly from anywhere and 24/7. And Mitsuku is regarded as the world's most human-like conversational AI. After some examples, let's look at some cases where bot development was a bit more challenging. I'm going to talk you through 2 case studies for 2 very different companies. The first one is for a global giant with over 250,000 employees. They wanted an AI-powered self-learning bot for their HR department to help reduce their customer service efforts. After all, people often see AI as a silver bullet solution, the one that solves all your problems, right? So it's not surprising that HR leaders also wanted to use a bot which was powered by AI and built by a major global vendor, which can sound pretty cool, right? Especially for people who don't work in tech. It's also a pretty safe choice to go with a global vendor. It's unlikely you get fired for hiring a big vendor like IBM or Microsoft. So the HR leader did just that. The big vendor was signed and they did a great job. The bot can recognize many intents and even tell jokes. It can make API calls and it can pull data from their complex internal systems. And of course, it learns over time. It was an absolute success. The vendor lived up to their reputation of technological excellence. Everything worked just how it was scoped. Beautiful, gated, waterfall execution, just how the executives at a client's firm liked it. And this is the price tag, £2 million. Pretty hefty, but for a seemingly complex project, kind of makes sense, right? Let's have a closer look at how the bot works. It says it can answer talent-related questions. So I asked one. How many accountants do we have? Its response was information about a system improvement and where the data was reviewed. It's not exactly what I was looking for. So I asked the bot what it can do, as I was pretty confused at this point. And it told me how many questions it had answered for employees so far, which I really didn't care about. I tried asking the same question a different way, and it told me a misguided joke about its creation. So from this conversation, I still have no idea what this bot is for and how to use it. The price tag makes a lot less sense now. This bot took about 1.5 years to develop as well. It's still being developed for an additional £1 million actually. Following the product management best practices, a basic solution could have been developed in just 2 weeks, about 2% of the budget. Then based on what the users are using, the advanced features could have been added later. And instead of waiting 1.5 years, the bot would have generated the outcomes after the 2nd week of development, if they would have used product thinking from the start, of course. But instead, they started with a solution before understanding their needs, and let the vendor work out what they need. This can be dangerous. The reality is that vendors want to sell you their services and their development time, as that's how they make the most money. Vendors are incentivized to sell complexity. AI takes more time and cost and money to make. So if you ask for AI, they will happily build you AI, whether you need it or not. And frankly, it's not the vendor's job to evaluate whether you need a feature or not. It's the job of the product function to do adequate discovery. Okay, so the next one is a Series A startup in the HR tech space. Before I joined, they were 6 months into a bot project. A group of engineers were building the infrastructure already. They chose, plugged in, and trained their favorite NLP model. They started adding complex functionality, such as search and answering free text questions. They had even deployed their solution on a client's website. So let's look at their bot. This message was sent to a chatbot from a disabled candidate who was wondering whether they can apply to the company's leadership academy. This is how the bot handled the question. One of the benefits of bots is that it can provide users with anonymity, allowing them to feel more comfortable asking sensitive questions. Unfortunately, the answer was not as sensitive as it should have been. The last thing you want is to be insulted by an algorithm. This may have been devastating for that person. It certainly was devastating for my client. So what did the 6 months of effort produce? Wasted time, no tangible business outcomes, and it also damaged their brand. So what went wrong here? These are all extremely bright people. That wasn't the issue. The project started with coding before understanding what the user really needs. They also didn't need AI to start with. The scope of the bot was just too broad, and that bot laughed at the people because NLP was told jokes. What's more important, reliably solving customers' issues or being funny? I picked the last example, the Series A startup, to look into more closely with you. I'm going to talk you through how we turned around that project in just 55 days, making it a massive success. The client have asked me to build 80 bots for their global client with a go-to-market strategy. So let's look at the strategy I chose. I started off with discovery to really understand what the business needed and what the users wanted. The first thing we had to figure out if a bot could even solve the problem or not. We performed the root cause analysis and dived deep into some of the questions that arose. Like, why do you really want a bot? Or why bots are best suited for the challenge? Doing this can be the difference between wasted energy and a really successful project. Next, we identified the part of the problem that was most suited to be solved with a bot. People want insight into their potential workplaces. That's not going to change, so it's a repeatable problem. By reading employee stories provided the bot, people can decide if they want to work for this organization or not. So it's solvable. People We want to look for jobs at any time, so a timely response is needed. The limit is when a human needs to take over. So you can schedule a live chat with employees who work at the company to answer the questions the bot can't. A bot needs users. This company already had 2.6 million users. They just needed an easy way to access the bot. Finally, a clear value. Through speaking to the bot and reading real stories from employees, people have a safe, judgment-free way to find out what a company is truly like to work in, without damaging the chance of getting a job. By anonymously asking questions that may not be appropriate in an interview setting. That's pretty clear value to me. Once we knew for sure that this was a really great bot problem, we needed to clarify the outcome and work out how it links back to the business strategy. In this case, the main outcome is increasing retention. So we have opportunities to choose from, like increasing client value or removing client frustration. Since we chose to focus on increasing client value, we also had plenty of possible solutions. For example, we can create more content for millennials or increase the tracking results. A chatbot can be one of those solutions, an output, not your strategy. Like every solution, it has to be linked back to the outcome and the business strategy. By linking the bot to the strategy, we ensured that the bot was aligned with the goals of the business and had clear and measurable outcomes. Without this, it's just a cool bot, but it doesn't really help your business in any way. Once we knew what to aim for, in this case, increasing the number of people applying for a role, it became clear how to focus the conversation, and it was very easy to measure the outcomes too. I simply divided the number of people who applied for jobs with the number of users who started to talk to the bot. Now that we explored the needs and clarified how the bot would fit into the strategy, we needed to understand what part of a problem is good to be solved with a bot. Trying to jam all functions of the platform into a bot isn't a good idea. That's why we have reused the scope and only built and tested features that will drive outcomes. I did this by creating assumptions. For example, can we get away with the button-based navigation? Which, by the way, is one of the biggest savings you can make to get you started. Using AI involves a lot of engineering and NLP training and increases the risk of false responses, like the ones I showed you previously. Neither of the examples I've shown you use button-based navigation. We also reduce the amount of content to only show 3 of the best employee stories. This way you can build and test the bot a lot faster. We also worked through some key planning questions to ensure sustainability of the project. For example, we ensured the strategy and resources were in place to complete the bot. We identified ways to get users and worked out how to market the bot. All of these questions were answered and more to ensure that the project was set up for success. Okay, so after strategizing, it was time to start building the process. By this time, we had a pretty good idea about the scope and the main features that needed testing. So we started by planning the bot's conversation flow using a basic flowchart, which can be useful to communicate what you're doing to stakeholders. I talked to the engineers about what they needed to easily integrate a bot from a third-party bot builder platform. And once the whole team was happy with the conversation flow and features, we chose a bot builder platform to iterate quickly. So you can see now how late in the game we chose a platform, that there was so much discovery to do first. After planning, I hired a conversation designer and started to make the copy of the bot. It needed to be done in 3 languages. We have Wizard of Oz that. Get a human to respond to a bot while talking to a user to make sure that your copy is right and the navigation flows nicely. We made sure we had a clear and concise intro message. We used human-centered design principles to test the bot. And I got people to try out each interaction and get feedback. I also minimized the conversation steps. A good website gives you value within 3 clicks. Aim for that. Once the prototype was ready, I asked five of my colleagues to talk to the bot with a clear goal in mind. Most of the time, only 5 people are needed to catch 80% of the issues. Also, an interaction only takes a few minutes, so it's a small ask from your colleagues. We checked the overall tone to make sure it felt consistent. And then, I customized the design and added media and emojis. Don't underestimate the power of emojis. They make a conversation flow better, feel light and friendly. And they look attractive on the screen as well. I made this graph just to summarize the effort over time with this project, but it actually applies to most bot projects. With a heavier upfront investment, you can make sure that you're delivering value and ensure you're not damaging your brand in the process. So let's talk about the successful outputs, what all of this work has produced. After 55 days, we delivered chatbots to 12 clients and created a clear delivery schedule and lean strategy that allowed the company to add the remaining 70 bots with only 4 hours work per bot. We increased the number of users by 30% and achieved a 7 times increase in job application conversion rates, which was the main KPI. The bot has talked to nearly 50,000 users and received over 5,000 job applications. The users left over 1,500 positive reviews and completed over 130 surveys in the bot. We also started to schedule user interviews automatically and booked in 5 during the first 2 weeks. Not bad for 55 days, considering they initially thought this would be a 2-year project. So bots are cool, and adding a bot and adding a product person and using the right methodology can make the huge difference. My advice to anyone who's thinking about building a bot is, don't start with choosing a technology. Don't write a single line of code without exploring the problem and understanding the needs of your users. And don't go too broad. However, make sure that you do have users. You do tie outcomes back to your strategy and clarify your success metrics. Do use lean and human-centric design principles. Do make sure that your users feel they are cool. To summarize, we worked out the strategy and made a plan on how to execute on it. I identified the skills needed from the business and hired in the right bot specialist contractors to help with the skills that are crucial but temporary. Next, we set up the processes to suit the challenge and applied best practices from modern product discovery and delivery, including the bot-specific knowledge, which we covered in the do's and don'ts earlier. So that's it. If you have any questions or would like to get in touch, reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me. And now it's time for Q&A.
Hi, Martin. Thank you very much for that. Great talk. If you could just unshare your screen there for us. Brilliant. So the Q&A will be at the end to both you and Kana, who I do believe has managed to sort out his tech. We can still see your screen, Martin, if you could just unshare that for us.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. Yeah, that's perfect. Kana, do we have you?
Yes, finally.
Fantastic.
3 laptops to connect.
Fantastic. Yes, everyone's delighted. So just to introduce Kana, guys, he is a product director at Capita Government Services, and Kana's talk tonight is value chain mapping, the blueprint to your product success. So Kana, do you just want to test your screen share?
Yeah. One second. Bear with me.
No problem. It's nice to see some of you taking advantage of the lovely weather and sat outside when engaging with Remote Product London. Very, very exciting, very agile of you. Hope you're all enjoying it. I hear it's going to turn for the worst tomorrow, so enjoy it while it lasts. Okay, Kana, so we can see your screen if you want to go into sort of full screen mode. There we go. That's it. We can see it perfectly. Audio's good. Over to you.
Okay, perfect. So thank you all for joining today. I was a bit nervous. It literally took 3 laptops. For some reason, the Zoom wouldn't work. It was just spinning. So third time lucky, definitely worked this time. So value chain mapping and quite a bit of a bold promise there that will be a blueprint to your product success. Value chain mapping is something that I came across few years ago. I typically, for the last few years, I've been working in kind of business process products in B2B. And I discovered really the value chain mapping to be one of those tools that I pretty much apply as a pivotal tool in throughout the entire product ideation, discovery through the product management and development. The background to it, sorry, let me just... So the background to it, why product chain mapping and what does it do? And just really go back to some basics, go to Amazon, and to quote Jeff Bezos, we're not competitor obsessed, we are customer obsessed. We start with a customer and we work backwards. And the most important single thing is to focus obsessively on customer. And I really found that using value chain mapping, it really helps me to get a big picture, to understand problem areas, to map them in a great area, in the great detail, and kind of track them as we go forward. So what I prepared is an example of how you can use a value chain mapping for a particular business processing product. So rather than kind of theorize, I'll walk us through example and see how that can be really applied in day-to-day practice. So let's say that we are building a customer onboarding product. So what did customer tell us? They said that we currently use manual customer onboarding. We use paper processing contracts. We use manual data input. Boarding time is up to 30 days. And customer needs to get onboarded to 7 different systems. In this particular case, something I forgot to mention, the company so the fictional company's place is a payments company, and they're providing merchant services. So the customer are small merchants that are either buying payment terminals or buying e-commerce package from the company. So we'll first start with a problem definition. And here are some questions. How do we drill through each of these questions? So when customers say, well, we currently use manual customer onboarding, the first thing we ask, so what's the impact? Bad customer experience. Okay, what's the impact of that? I don't quite know. Okay, point to research. Paper processing contracts, what's the impact? Well, we spend time with customers, manual input for 3 to 5 different contracts at a time. Okay, so the problem here is time and it's customer experience. What is the impact? Attrition, bad NPS, less time to sell. Can we quantify that? So we have 2 hours per customer, and at this point we didn't know what the attrition was, so it's another point for research. So manual data input, what's the impact? So operationals, FTE time, roughly £3 per application. Can you quantify that on a yearly basis? Sure, that's 8 hours, that's £8 per hour times this time that, roughly around 140,000 a year. Great, we've got some numbers to work with. Boarding time up to 30 days. What is the impact? Okay, I have a 30% attrition rate and also time to revenue, right? So it's not only the attrition, but also I start trading later, which means I'm losing money. Revenue comes 30 days later. Let's quantify the impact. Well, given different figures, we could potentially be losing 1 million a year. Now we're talking business. We can see real value leaking there. Okay, so merchant needs to get onboarded to 7 different systems. What's the impact? Well, we accounted for that above through operations. Okay, is there anything else? We'll think that's all. At that point, you probably know that no, that's definitely not all. We want to do a bit more of research. So to help us to get through that research and gather all this data and try to understand whether there is a business case or not and where the value is in a product, we would first start just by mapping very high level business process. So over here, we effectively have, what happens is that a salesperson, he would typically go to the client's premise with paper contracts. And because there are different contracts, there's going to be a post contract, there's going to be a payment processing contract, there's going to be typically Amex contract, and there might be something else, the number of contracts that they need to sign. And there will be paper contracts, so customer will have to enter lots of same data onto different pieces of paper. So as you can imagine, that takes quite a bit of time. That then goes into operations. Operations will take a look, is data input complete? No. Okay, return the contract back, probably by post. You're lucky if you get it back, so we can see where the attrition kicks in. You then take a look, okay, so what happens if the data is completed, it goes into compliance. So somebody needs to check, risk department needs to check for AML, they needs to check for KYC, for KYB, for risk, there are a number of compliance procedures, and you might end up with a data error. There might be misspelled name, there might be wrong address, there might be wrong account details, there might be wrong company details. In either case, we need to contact the merchant again. Merchant is a busy person. It might take a week before we get a reply, before we manage to get all the data. If, there might be a reason that things don't check out in compliance, so we would reject the service to the merchant, or we would accept the merchant, which would then go to contract signing, which would then go to onboarding to different systems, which would then activate merchant's account, and we would ship the device. So each of those processes can go much more granular, but I'm just, for the sake of this example, I'm just using a very high level process overview. So here is the bare bones of the value chain map. So we've got some really important things to note on the left-hand side. So we are identifying personas. We are identifying what exactly what are the key areas that we are addressing, what is the process, what are the outcomes, what are the pains, what are the metrics that we want to track, what is the solution that we are using to mitigate the pains, and what is the desired impact, what is the to-be state. So let's start by having an overview and taking a look at this area here. Let's take a look at what first. So we have a data collection, we have data input, we have risk and AML, we have contract, we have boarding, and we have fulfillment, right? So sales are looking after this, operations after data input, compliance after risk, operations after contract, operations after boarding, and third party after fulfillment. So we can see there are a number of parties across company and third party involved in driving this business process. So what is that process? We'll go and try to understand that. Two things that we learned at this point. One thing is, yes, you're going to give it a first go by talking to the stakeholders. A very important thing is you really want to witness this process in person. I can definitely say that there hasn't been once in my practice at a particular business process that I looked at that the data that I collected through interviews was really 100% corresponding and nothing was missed with the observation that that we had once we were really on the floor with the operations or with the people that are effectively delivering the service. So this particular case, the process is you visit the customer, you gather application form, pretty much now as we same process that we walked through on the previous slide. So I'm not going to repeat that. So we kind of mapped that. Next thing is, what are the outcomes, right? So what do we really want to achieve at each part of that process, right? So you can see we're kind of getting quite granular, and we can go way more granular than this. So typically when we are building a product, you would go and ask, okay, what is the overall outcome of the product? Here you're starting to break that down into several layers. So in this particular case, what is the outcome for the desired outcome for data collection? Well, I want to collect all the data that's required. The data should be accurate, and I need time efficiency, right? data input, all paper form data needs to be accurately entered into the system. For risk and AML, there needs to be thorough and efficient assessment. For contract, there needs to be contracts need to be issued, signed, and returned and stored. Onboarding, we want to be able to onboard and activate customer on systems. So effectively, really the outcome is the customers should be active on various systems. And finally, we need to ship trading equipment to customers. In this particular case, a point of sale device or a payment device. Okay, now let's take a look at pains, right? What are the really difficulties? What are the frictions in this process? So we can see that as a first step, we are mapping that there are 3 to 5 paper forms with largely repeated information. So try to put yourself in the shoes of a small business owner. You're running a small shop. You're probably the only person manning the floor. And somebody's asking you to enter your information 3 to 5 times onto different documents again and again, right? It's very frustrating. You were not expecting that in a digital age, yet it happens every day. So it's lots of time wasting for both salesperson and for the customer, which then naturally results in a poor customer experience. In operations, big pain, it's manual data input. You end up with missing data. You need to return it to the seller. Seller needs to return it to the merchant. It's a very painful process and it causes great time delay. For compliance, compliance effectively needs to manually take the data from the system or from the contracts and key it into typically, again, 5 other systems to be able to get the results that they need, right? And then especially if they get invalid data, they need to return to the seller, go through the same process again, so lots of frustration and time delay. On operations, they need to sign the contract now from the company side and snail mail that contract to the client, which causes time delay. And frequently what happens, by that time, client already canceled the contract. They're not willing to activate, and we lost typically around 30% of clients by this point in time. When it comes to onboarding, you again manually had to input data into individual systems. You have incorrect data, you have time delay, and and on the fulfillment side, you need to email that email, right? So it's all kind of very manual, and which causes further time delay. So now we know what those pains are, but let us really now translate that pains into some metrics that we really want to track. So in this particular case, I'm choosing operational efficiency, and I'm choosing attrition, right? So we can see operational efficiency over there, 2 hours of someone's time, that's roughly £30. Here I calculated FTE time typically spent per application at £36. I'm also saying that I've got a 30% of missing data. I want to be able to track that for success because I want to bring that to 0. And typically I would get around 10 days delay because I need to go back and forth. Moving to compliance, this is roughly around £25 of someone's time, but 25% of applications that come through have a wrong data. So think about it, we are returning 30% of applications for missing data. Once that is completed, 25% of that had wrong data, right? Which causes additional delays because we need to call customer, email customer, get the data back, fill that in to be able to perform the checks. So most of pain is concentrated in this area. We're then moving to operations. They now need to go over that, sign the contract, post it, spend money on postage, and at that point we are already occurring roughly around 30, we're recording 30% attrition. Boarding seems to be fairly easy. So we have only 1 day delay and we have only £12 cost. When it comes to third party, let's say there is £2 cost per application and creates roughly around 2 days delay. So immediately here, this starts giving us an idea, where do we think that quantitatively and qualitatively the biggest problem areas are, and where can we score the biggest wins. So if we now go and take a look at a solution, how can we typically solve this? So at this point in time, you finished with your discovery, you've got all the data, now you can get into solutioning workshops. So before that, you created your personas, you described those personas, you identified goals, you identified pains, all the data is there. You can now bring your creative teams, you can bring all the stakeholders, you can have a big a solutioning workshop where you're going step to step and you're kind of getting everyone's inputs. In this particular case, let's just say that it's decided here we are going to use a digital form to collect the data, and we are going to use APIs for data validation. So what APIs we're using? So for example, instead of allowing somebody to type in their address manually, you're using postcode checker, so you know that the address is going to be recorded in the right format and it's going to be pretty accurate. You can use various other APIs, for example, to check someone's bank account details. You'll be able to check whether bank account details and sort code are a match. You'll be able to check whether those account details are a match to someone's actual bank account, right? So there's a whole variety of data checks you'll be able to perform. You'll be able to perform so that once somebody clicks submit button or complete the application form, the data is fully valid, right? So from there, you're moving into operations. Now, operations, they don't need data input anymore because you're completing that here, but you're introducing digital case management, right? Because effectively now you created application, which becomes a case, and you can now manage that case across various teams, which enables that handover and enables you to track the progress, to have the reporting, and also to automate the full process. So in this particular case, all the tools are there for you to be able to fully automate a process. So if you can imagine here, we're collecting all the data that is being fully validated during entry, data is submitted, right, and flows through. Typically what will happen in risk and AML, it's a bad practice to fully automate everything. So any rejections where you'll be able to configure your scores with all the systems. So let's say you can say, okay, for any score where the confidence for a pass is lower than 90% or 95% or whatever the percentage is, I want to take a manual look at that application before we reject it, right? Because you don't really want to reject potential customer if you don't have to. And then also a wise thing to introduce is that you want to do random checks. So let's say, for example, you create a randomizer in the system where every 10th application is going to be directed to the queue for manual checks, right? So you're now creating automation on the back of that digital case management. Following that through, you can introduce digital contracts and documents, right? Where again, the data is pulled. Data can be automatically pulled out of the digital form. It can be mapped to the contract, and your automated workflow engine can track all the events, can automatically send an email out once the contract is signed via DocuSign or any equivalent. It gets back, and again, the entire process is fully automated. From there, you can now create API integrations. If you have 7 different systems, you will need to find some ETL data solution and some further automation. And instead of emailing your third-party provider, you can integrate into their APIs. So once customer is successfully boarded, you can automatically trigger the fulfillment. So out of those areas, which ones do you think would you pick as the first thing that we should be focusing on delivery, and which of those you think would be the most expensive one? Any volunteers? No? Okay. So before we started building a very similar product to this, management was betting that the most important feature of the product is going to be automation in boarding, right? Now, for those of you who had to deal with legacy systems, which in this case, this was out of 7 systems that we had to board on, I think only Salesforce as a CRM and another systems actually had APIs. With the rest, we had to deal with a whole sorts of mess. You had to deal with data dictionaries, ETL, creating automation, ended up being the most lengthy and expensive process. The fastest one to do was to create a digital form, and that effectively provided most value, right? So in this particular case, if I reveal the final piece, which is impact, we can now see, once we start tracking everything, we can start saying, okay, which feature and which particular part of the process we should be dealing with first. Because the last thing you want to do is wait for a year before you build everything end to end. You really want to take a look, how quickly can I go to market? How quickly can I go live and start delivering value? In this particular case, we found that developing a digital form and creating API validation to correct that data has pretty much provided around 70% of the total value, and was by far the cheapest and the fastest piece to deliver. The piece that we left for the last, and that was the most expensive, was effective integration, because we left that as a part of the manual process. We didn't automate that all the way to the end. Because if you really take a look as an impact, it's cheap and it causes only 1 day of delay. And effectively that 1 day, if the rest of the process is automated, is not a 1 day anymore, but everything can be done roughly in an hour or 2. So breaking the entire process in the process like this gave us a really great overview. We really understand which persona has problems where, what are the outcomes, what are we tracking. So if any of you are using a lean product canvas as your go-to method for scoping product opportunities and trying to validate them and trying to understand where the value is, value chain mapping effectively takes care of your first 3 boxes, right? Of your problem, of your solution, and of your metrics. And it's a great way to further drill down. And if you're creating a business case, this can really very, very easily, very quickly, instead of writing tons of literature, it provides a great way to illustrate your business case. What I added here on the side, you can do a bit more maths on the side here. So for example, I added some totals, and now I can see I just added 2 dimensions to that per application, which is really important because you want to go down to that transactional level. And I just added some annual numbers using some typical business size to see what that looks like. So you can see in this particular case that we were able to hugely improve operational efficiency and reduce FTE time, but we were also able to massively reduce attrition costs, because effectively we are now able to enable 24 hours onboarding, which effectively means that attrition goes down to almost 0, because merchants really don't have time to cancel the contract and to move to the next provider. You're way too fast to allow for attrition. And there was another interesting thing, is that when you typically work on value chain maps, in my experience, you will always find that there is going to be some adjacent value, something that is not operational, some metric that you were not even aware of that is going to get impacted by this and create additional value that's just going to be a bonus. In this particular case, because salespeople were getting around 2 hours per customer back, right? So consider now, if they have 8 hours a day and they're spending 2 hours per customer, they're seeing maximum 4 customers. If I'm now cutting that out to 30 minutes, they have 4 hours extra to spend knocking doors and create fresh leads, right? In this particular case, within 6 months of deploying this application, the first client that we deployed it for had 60% of increase in new opportunities and leads that were created, that were high quality leads and had a very high conversion rate, which created completely another dimension in the uptake of the business and the business benefit that was delivered, right? So that's a particular value that fell through the cracks. We didn't anticipate it, we were not tracking it, and it was a wonderful surprise that we were able to uncover as we were kind of evaluating how product is delivering against those metrics. Because one thing is, value chain map is something that is not something that you do, informs your delivery, informs your roadmap, and you put it on a shelf, you don't look at it again. No, it's a living document. As you are going through the stages of product development, as you are discovering new features, as you're optimizing product, you will always keep on going back to the value chain map as a tool where you're tracking everything, where you're mapping everything, and you can have an oversight of your application. So from there, really the next steps, once you map that out, you can now define and prioritize your roadmap. So you can evaluate each part of the solution using cost versus value. You can look at technical dependencies, which is important. You take a look at customer experience. Based on these three, you'll be able to understand which parts of the solution you want to deliver first, how to prioritize the features and functionality. You want to validate solutions because at this point you really run some solutioning workshops and you had lots of hypotheses. So some things that look more risky, you really want to prototype and see whether that is really going to solve it. That will help you define your beta, and you'll be able to go to market quite early. And to really summarize, to me, this is really the greatest benefit. It makes you, it gives you a very powerful tool in your negotiations and presentations with a stakeholder, because you have data and you're not just another person with an opinion. So thank you for your attention. Alex, over to you.
Kana, thank you very much. Great talk. So a couple of questions have come in for you both. Martin, have I got you there?
Oh, yes.
Perfect, perfect. So Martin, a question to you.
Yes.
I feel our business could benefit from a chatbot.
Okay.
What advice would you give for me to pitch this to my stakeholders and get the investment for it?
But first I would understand why it would benefit, see how it would help, and I would try to quantify it in terms of benefits, hours saved, maybe map the value chain of it, right? And yeah, it's honestly, it's an easy sell, especially because you can get something up and running in 2 weeks. If you can't get, 2 weeks worth of product time with your engineers, or not even your engineers, just your product team, some of them, then there's already an issue. It's you just do one, literally in your afternoon, do one, show it to them. I always sell a bot with creating a rapid prototype and taking it to the people and saying, hey, look, this is your thing. Try it. Cool. It saves this much. These are your quantified values. It's very easy to develop. Go for it.
Okay, thank you very much. To Kana, regarding the value chain mapping, the process flow is linear. Is there any potential benefit for having an iterative loop?
So there is absolutely an iterative loop in the whole thing. So you clearly, when you're starting with your discovery. So you're really understanding, you try to understand all the actors, all the personas, you define the pains, right? So you have the discovery and you're going to solutions. Now you probably, the solutioning element is where you're introducing a loop because you want to start validating those solutions, right? So effectively up to solutioning, you're gathering your data, right? And discovery process is fairly linear process, right? The loops that we've done in discovery, for example, is we would typically start with managers. So you start collecting all the data, but you want to start validating that with people who are effectively delivering the service. And you might talk to a few different people, you might gather data, something might be contradicting, you go around, you validate that, you carry on. But really your iterative process starts around solutioning, because you might come up with ideas how you can improve this particular part of the process. Certain things are very straightforward. You've done it many times. You know it's going to work. You don't need to test that. The other things that you didn't do before, and it's a bit more tricky, this is something you definitely want to test, and you want to iterate, and you want to see how it performs, right? And then this is why, so my point, so when it comes to iterative process, this is why you want to get out as soon as possible, really, with a minimum viable feature that can start providing business value. So in our case, we immediately went out with a data collection form while we were still testing and working on the other things. And that data collection form had a number of validations in beta before we were happy that was performing and delivering the value that we anticipated at the beginning. So like that, effectively, you're using your standard, you're using your standard feedback loops, build, measure, learn loops, as you're going through the rest of the development and the design process.
Thank you. So Martin, what would you say to people who believe a human element cannot be beaten by a bot?
I really agree. Why do we have to beat humans? I think so. Deep Blue always beats Kasparov, right? The IBM chess machine, right? But if a human is combined with a semi-professional chess player, semi-professional chess players combined with an AI that gives them the statistics, it will always beat everyone. So humans are there to help people. AI is there to help people get better. Bots are just there to help you. It's not there to overtake you. All the things that you don't want to do, just farm it out to the bot. All the repetitive things, that's fine. No one's taking away your creative stuff. Actually, we're trying to get you to do more creative stuff by freeing you up from the mundane. That's what bots for.
Okay. Kana, where on-the-ground observation proves to be needed to fill in gaps in interviews, what methods might we use during off-site working?
So during off-site working, you mean in a current remote? Okay, so that's clearly a bit of a challenge, and I don't have an answer for that. Our go-to method is always fly on the wall. So you really go and you observe, you shadow. Yes, you interview and you ask, but you really kind of, it's a combination of the two. But we find shadowing, kind of fly on the wall, to be the most insightful. So you would use typical, user research methods. But right now, I actually don't know. So I didn't have to. So right now we are doing user research. I have a live project at the moment, but it's all really done through interviews, because in this particular case, we also don't have a live service delivery that we can monitor. If we had one, that would be a really interesting thing. We would probably need to ask for permission for somebody to share the screen, if they feel comfortable about that, right? To share the screen, which would probably be an equivalent. I mean, I'm just thinking, as I speak here, when people allow us to shadow them and to watch, it's very transparent. We are sitting behind them, next to them, and we are observing what goes on the screen. So there's really nothing to hide. So in one sense, it's not very different from giving somebody, your share screen access and allowing them to observe how you're dealing with a particular situation.
Thank you.
May
Martin, of course, go on. Over to you, Kana.
If you don't mind me just sharing something. So on a previous question that was asked to Martin in terms of benefits of bots and versus humans, and just some of very recent experience where we are heavily experimenting and using bots in various forms. So, when we talk about bots, we typically think about chatbots, where you go into a little chat, right? But that extends now to WhatsApp. Same bot engine extends to various channels, from IVR, right, to WhatsApp, to Facebook, to whatever else. And we found that lots of our customers, they really want to retain human touch, right? They really want to retain that personal touch. But at the same time, we recognize that there is a great portion of the users who would much rather go through something automated and very fast that will give them very quick answers, with the option, if they need to talk to human, they know they can talk to human straight away. And we found that that's a really great balance that maintains the brand's approachability and being very human as a brand, but at the same time, it helps to process things very quickly for those customers who would prefer that.
Thank you. Another one to Martin. The testing seems to require real human interaction to gauge the quality of the responses. So is test automation even possible for something like this?
I'm not sure what you mean by test automation. So if you're thinking about, is there a broken loop? Yes, that can be very easily automated. A lot of platforms already tell you that you need to do something. If you're building a scripted product where there's just a decision tree, nothing's really gonna go wrong because you know what you're doing. If you're building an AI product, there's going to be a massive list of places or intents that the AI misunderstood. And that's your gold mine as a product manager. That's where you go for new ideas, inspirations, and new features to build. Can it be tested automatically? No, the issues can be highlighted, but then you have to go in as a human and understand what do you want to do with it, if that makes sense.
Hopefully it does to the questioner. And that is it for questions for this week, guys. Martin, Kana, thank you very much for your contribution and your talks this week. Both great talks, really insightful, and as with previous weeks, drew some great questions from our product community. If it's of interest to any of you, we've got Agile London tomorrow night, same time, 6 p.m. So jump on that if that's of interest. This recording will be up very soon. It will be up on our YouTube channel within 24 hours. You can either head straight there or go and check out our website, look on our communities page, and there's a hyperlink there to our YouTube page. Thank you once again to everyone for joining these events. You know, we can provide the platform, but it would be nothing without our speakers and people getting involved and people joining. So, you know, we're also really grateful for this. I've said it, you know, the last week or so, definitely felt things are picking up a little bit in the sort of job market. So if you are looking, do reach out. My name's Alex Scriven, not difficult to find on LinkedIn. Also, if you want to get involved a little bit more on Product London and you would like to speak yourself, do also reach out and sort of come at me with a title of your talk and what you'd like to talk about to the product community. So once again, Martin, Kana, thank you very much for your time this evening and your talks. And to everyone else, have a good evening and I'll see you next week. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.